you're trying to figure out whether nursing is the right career path for you or not, or if you should even stay in the profession, then that's what I'm gonna be talking about in this video. Because I've been a nurse now for about 13 years, and in those 13 years, I've had my share of burnout, but I am now at a point where I work 20 hours a week. I'm making $110 an hour. Monica, my wife, is a nurse, and she's been a nurse for about 12 years. She makes $142 an hour, and we do not work more than 20 hours a week for me and 22 to 23 hours a week for Monica. And the reason we were able to get into the position we're in today is because of the fact that during COVID, we saw how stressful the environment was. I remember at the beginning of COVID how no shifts were being given to nurses. And the reason for that is because nobody wanted to go to the hospital. There were patients that were staying at home when they had stroke-like symptoms, patients that were having chest pain and symptoms of a heart attack who refused to go to the hospital because they were afraid of getting COVID. And thankfully, I work for a hospital system that could not send nurses home because we have a union in place that made sure when they had these contract negotiations, one of the stipulations they placed in the contract was that the hospital was not allowed to send nurses home, regardless of the census. But this wasn't the case nationwide. There were healthcare workers at Stanford, a major hospital system that paid nurses well over $100 an hour, that was reducing employee pay by over 30%. And I could not imagine me and Monica surviving if they had reduced our pay by 30% when you include the fact that we had over $128,000 in debt at the time. But that only lasted a few months. Shortly thereafter, the hospitals were getting bombarded by the number of COVID positive patients that were coming in. Patients were getting hospitalized in droves to the point where these hospitals were operating over capacity. They could not handle the number of patients that went to their units. As a result, they had to resort to installing tents outside of their facilities. And if you remember correctly, during this time, we did not have the PPE available to support all of the staff and the cases that were coming into the hospital system. Staff would come into the hospital with their own PPE. And if you look at cases in New York, I even interviewed a nurse. Her name is Sheila. I believe she was a pediatric ICU if I'm not mistaken, but she was working in a unit where nurses were coming to the hospital with garbage bags because the hospital she worked in could not provide them with the PPE that they needed. And for those of you that don't know what PPE stands for, is personal protective equipment. And in addition to working under these unsafe conditions without the proper PPE, these nurses were working so understaffed that in many cases, places like the ER, nurses had no ratios. Thankfully, I work in California where we do have nurse to patient ratios. So I think we felt it a little bit less here in California, but places all over the country that don't have strict nurse to patient ratios were feeling it the most. But then that's when travel nurses came in. Travel nurses were supposed to be our saviors. Hospital systems were paying travel nurses upwards of $10,000 a week so they can help them take care of all of the patients that were overwhelming the hospital system. And these travel nurses made bank during that time. They also burned themselves out because a lot of these travel nurses were working nonstop for 2, 3, 4 months, 5 months at a time. And I know some travel nurses that worked 6 to 8 months nonstop. They went from contract to contract because they knew this was not gonna last forever. And in that time frame, so many of them got burned out in the process. A lot of the smart ones used their money wisely. And instead of wasting that money away, they used their income and invested it in a side hustle, in real estate, in the stock market, bought index fund with their money. They did all these things because they knew that money wouldn't last. And overworking themselves to the bone was going to have an impact on their mental health they would not be able to get out of if they didn't have the financial resources to deal with the consequences. But it's because of COVID that I think that the burnout rate has accelerated over the years. Because we also had patients who would come into the ER, and these were the patients that refused to get vaccinated, but would end up getting hospitalized, end up in the ICU, and in many cases end up dead. Believe it or not, that is what we saw in the hospital system. And a lot of this could have been preventable. But it got to a point where we felt like broken records in the hospital system because we kept telling patients, just get vaccinated and the problem will be solved. When Monica and I first started working as nurses, we were working in New York City where we had no ratios and just graduated nursing school, got into so much debt that the only solution to getting out of it was picking up overtime. And the thing that we realized is that the less we saw each other, the less we spent time with each other and our daughter and our family, the more of a toll that took on our relationship mental health, physical health, and our overall health in general. Because no matter how much overtime we picked up at the time, it seemed like we could just not get out of the rut that we were in. It wasn't until we moved to California, COVID hit, and we thought we were going to lose our jobs that we started picking up overtime for the right reasons. We started picking up overtime so that we could pay off all of our debt and finally live a life where we could spend more time with each other. Because at the end of the day, when you think about the patients that come into your hospital, the ones that are most depressed, facing emotional instability, these are the patients that don't have family support. They don't have friends to turn to. So we worked our butt off for an entire year. And don't get me wrong, we still didn't work more than 40 hours a week. Because here in California, we were making well over $100 an hour already. So we played it smart because we knew as 8-hour shift employees here in California, you can make time and a half after the 8th hour and make double your pay between the 12th hour and the 16th hour. As 8-hour shift employees, we picked up an additional 4 hours here or an additional shift on the days that we worked. By the end of the year, we paid $128,000. Once we were done with all of that debt, we spent an entire year investing all of the income we made. All of that money that was going towards our debt, we just used it and invested it in index funds instead. So today our net worth is $800,000, but at the time when we were paying off all this debt, our net worth was negative $80,000. So we've gotten to a point where all this debt is paid off and we told ourselves, do we really need to continue picking up overtime? I mean, we could, right? If the plan is to retire early, then why not pick up additional hours? But then we said to ourselves, our net worth is $800,000 right now. If we don't pick up any overtime hours anymore, by the time we reach retirement age, our net worth will be well over $4 million, which is why we sat down and had a really serious discussion with ourselves. Would we rather spend our most meaningful years with each other or at work? And that's why we chose to reduce our hours. I gradually went from working 28 hours to 30 hours a week when we were picking up all these overtime hours to 20 hours a week. And Monica did the same. So now we work 20 hours a week on average and we still bring home about $16,000 a month. So do we really need to pick up additional hours? No, we don't. And this has been the best decision we've ever made in our lives because today we are happier than we've ever been before. This year alone, we went to New York City for about 2.5 weeks. We drove to Canada for 5 days. A week later, we went to Georgia. 2 weeks after that, we went to Curacao. And then we had a layover in New York for a day and a half. Now, 2 weeks later, we're going to Hawaii. And we're going to be in Hawaii for another week. And then Monica, myself, and our son, and my co-founder are going to be going to a conference in New York City so we can showcase our app. And if you don't know what our app is, it's an app that allows nurses to compare their current salary and their cost of living to over 1,000 cities in the United States. You'll be able to see the demographics in these cities, the crime data, the schools, in case you have kids and you want to know what the school system is like. You'll be able to see elementary school, middle school, and high schools. And you'll also be able to see the monthly temperatures in the cities. We also have a community in the app so you can talk with other nurses and share your experience or ask them questions related to any topic that you want. But if you're a nurse today and you're struggling financially, think about using our app because then you'll be able to find if there's another city you can move to, even if it's a city that's close to your area that's going to pay you more than you currently make when you factor in the cost of living. And one of the most important things you need to do is pay off your debt. That was one of the most liberating feelings that I've ever felt in my life. Almost my entire life, all I lived on was debt. Credit card debt here, student loan debt here, a car note here. It was nonstop debt. But once we paid that off, we were free to do whatever we wanted as long as we did it within our means. If we don't have enough money in our bank account to take a vacation, we're not going to take that vacation. If we don't have enough money to purchase a luxury item, we're not going to purchase that luxury item. You cannot be thinking about the number of paychecks you're going to have in the future. You have to think about the paychecks you have today. And another thing you should consider is that if you work for a hospital that does not have a union, you're going to have a lot less protection than someone who does. I've only worked in hospital systems that have union protections. Like I said, during COVID, they could not send us home. We were protected during times of low census, but not every union is like that. That's why I try to share the best union contracts with nurses who watch our videos. But anyway, let me know in the comment section, are you one of these nurses who are burned out? And if so, what is the reason why you're so burned out? And if you're not burned out, let us know the secret. And if you want more videos like this, let me know in the comment section. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys next time.